All right, so we have a really special thing happening right now. Chris Voss started a company called Black Swan, okay? And he has 3 of his negotiators on the phone, on Zoom. Let's go ahead and put them up. Hello. Now I have to look at the camera so that they see me. Hi, I'm Dr. Bill. And can you guys each introduce yourselves? Go ahead. Well, I don't know your names, and it's not on there. The woman.
The woman. Hi, I'm Chelsea. I'm the Director of Operations here at the Black Swan Group, and we're super happy to be here today.
Okay, Chelsea. And next to you is a man in a plaid shirt. That'd be you. No, plaid shirt. You have a solid shirt. What's your name, mister, in the plaid shirt?
Hello, my name is George Gale. I am one of the instructors here at the Black Swan. Incredibly excited to be here with each and every single one of you.
All right, Chelsea, George, and
Don from the Black Swan Group as well. I'm out here in Las Vegas right now. And Jorge, where are you at?
I am in Orlando, Florida, around Mickey Mouse.
So very excited to be here. We're gonna have fun today.
all right. So why don't you tell us what you guys do? Chelsea?
Chelsea, did you want to do this or?
Go ahead, take it away, guys.
All right. So the Black Swan Group was started in the early 2000s by Chris Voss, who is and was the lead negotiator, the lead international negotiator for the FBI. And to simplify it, he took hostage negotiator techniques that they used that now are used kind of worldwide. And he went to Harvard Business School. He developed a system and started improving hostage negotiation skills to be used in life and in the business world. In 2016, he wrote a book called Never Split the Difference, which really launched this company. And we do negotiation training, and it is all based on hostage negotiator techniques. So I'm a retired hostage negotiator from Las Vegas. Jorge is from the business world, but he used the skills to make millions. And what we found is with these skills, and we'll talk a lot about them here in the next 90 minutes, these skills are excellent interpersonally, as well as in the business world for salary negotiations, for job applications, all of the stuff they're going to use them for.
Awesome. So did you guys just want to give us information, or was this mainly for you to have our students asking you questions?
Well, we've got a
Oh, they're
presentation.
going to run a workshop? Okay, sorry. This is new to me, guys, and it's a live show. So the only thing is, hey, Charlie, hold on a sec. If students want, I mean, you can obviously see them up on the screen. They can't see you. So if you get to a point in the presentation where you actually would like students to ask questions and things like that, can you zoom in on the students, Josh, or should I have the students come on up here? Oh, you have Paul? All right, we're all set. I'm going to go sit in the back and enjoy this. Thank you, guys.
It's a pleasure to be here. Like I said, my name is Chelsea. I'm the Director of Operations of the Black Swan Group, and we're really pleased to bring to you a great course. It's called our Negotiation 9 course. It's going to be going over the 9 key essential skills that we have here at the Black Swan Group. And George and Don will be presenting it to you for the next 90 minutes, so enjoy.
All right. To kick it off, like I said, these skills are very powerful, but you can use them every day. I worked for 27 years in law enforcement. I did a bunch of different things. And one of the regrets that I have is that I wasn't Black Swan trained before I became a cop, because I missed a great deal of information, a number of opportunities. And this stuff really, really works in your day-to-day stuff. I don't know how we're doing questions, if you can put them in the chat or if you want to stand up and ask questions, but I'm gonna talk to you today about our negotiation 9, we call it. And I'm gonna share my screen here and hopefully it works. Are we good? Can everybody see that all right? I hope.
We
What's that?
click on swap.
Click on what? Yeah, I don't know what that is.
Right on the,
We can see your notes. Go to display.
Oh, here's what we'll do then. Good. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on, I'm sorry. I can mess up at light speed. So just bear with me. There we go. Are you good now? Okay. All right. All right, we'll go with that. And that hasn't changed anything, right? What's that? Okay. All right. So our Black Swan skills, like I said, are they go from very basic to very advanced. The negotiation 9 that we're going to talk about today are 9 skills that we use in our basic stuff, and most of them are covered in that book that we talked about. As I go through these, be thinking about what it is in your everyday conversations, your difficult conversations that you stumble across, and you'll start to draw parallels between what you see every day and how people interact with you every day, and ways that you can use these skills to not only get through difficult conversations, but also stop the obstacles before they even start to exist. And that's the true beauty of it. So like I said, I was a hostage negotiator with the Las Vegas Police Department for several years. When I retired as an assistant team leader. And we used a version of the skills that I'll talk about, but I also did other stuff. Our hostage negotiation team wasn't my only job. In fact, I was on call for it. The whole team is. There's only one full-time member of our hostage negotiation team, but we go out a lot. So in my day job, I was working sex crimes or working organized crime or working patrol. And all of these skills would have been so valuable in that realm, but we never pulled them out of the hostage negotiator realm and used them like we're going to teach you to use them today. So, Jorge, before we launch, would you mind just letting everybody know what your background is? And
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Again, thank you so much for participating. My name again is George Gale. I actually lived in New York City for 27 years, graduated from aviation high school in Queens, New York. I've always had an interest in aviation, and so went to that high school to get my what's called an airframe and power plant license, in essence, to fix airplanes. Spent some time there, did some aviation related work, got some hours in flights. And then I was very fortunate to join JetBlue in the early stages in the first 12 months when they launched. They had 3 airplanes at the time, was one of the small little group of 300 people that started with the airline. And that was due to the great work that the high school did and events like the ones that you're in. I participated a lot in those, and teachers, along with others, supported me greatly. And so I was able to take a lot of the things that they taught me in such events and then move throughout my career in the airline. Eventually, did over 8, 9 different positions in supply chain, maintenance related work, engineering type of work. And ultimately, 7 years prior to me leaving the airline, I joined the finance department, specifically the department that deals with buying everything for the airline. They call it sourcing procurement. In essence, everything that you see when you walk into an airport for an airline, from chips, sodas, baggage, carriage, computers, airplanes, everything we bought. And I met Chris in 2017. And he came to the airline, brought him to the airline to teach us how to negotiate. And the skills that you're going to learn today is what we learned back then. And they have even improved. A lot of things have increased in terms of efficiencies in the way that you're going to learn them today. And those skills, the ones that you're going to learn that were taught back then to us, incredibly helped us tremendously to save millions of dollars for the airline. And then after I left in 20 years after I joined the airline, I started a company and used these skills to help me. So what you're going to learn today, I ask that you please write down, ask as many questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question. Whatever comes to your mind, please come up stage and ask. We're here to help. We're here to support you in your journey that you're about to take as you ultimately graduate. So go for it. No question is a stupid question. Go for it.
All right. So as we move forward, the stuff I'm going to talk about is going to seem kind of foreign, almost like a foreign language. We have been conditioned since we were little kids to talk in a very transactional way. And don't let the negotiation part of our training intimidate you into thinking that this is only used during a negotiation. Because if you think about it, you're in a negotiation a lot. You're in a negotiation anytime you or the person you're talking to has I want or I need in their mind. So when you're ordering drinks, when you're doing nearly anything, you're in a bit of a negotiation. What our skills do is we give you a method that you have to implement. And if you implement it and you are effortful in it and you practice it, you will go from being a good communicator and a good listener to a great communicator and a great listener. And we'll talk about the benefits of that as we go forward. Our company was founded, and it's called the Black Swan Group, because black swans are those things that are hidden from us in the initial conversation, whether willfully or blindly. The person doesn't even know that it's important, the person we're talking to. And when you find those black swans, they change everything going forward. So that's what we're shooting for. As I'm talking, feel free to take notes. It'll help, build those neural pathways for getting better at these skills. I'm going to feed you a lot of information. You'll have to practice it about 64 to 67 reps to even start a habit. And we all work on these skills all the time. As a group, we're constantly training ourselves, debriefing ourselves to see that we get better at these. So like any other thing that you learn, you have to implement it to make it work. I've got, from my retirement, dozens of notebooks in my office of old trainings that I took. And a lot of them I didn't implement day to day, so I lost the skill. This is a perishable skill, but it's almost like magic when you start using it. So I'm going to dive in. Like I said, our negotiation 9 is based on active listening skills from hostage negotiators. Now, you might think this list makes no sense. you probably think that a retired cop doesn't have much to teach you about talking to people. You may even be skeptical about how effective this is. I know that your mind's on a million different things. I know you've got a lot of information from the conference that you're in. These skills that we're going to introduce you to, note that they're not numbered. They're not listed in any certain order of importance. In fact, the bottom one, tone, unlocks the effectiveness of all of the other skills. Without it, these skills fail and may even make things worse. But just know that there's no list here. This is just there's no numbered list here. They're important. They're all important, and they all work. So, what is our negotiation 9? Well, like I said, it's an active listening skill set. It was developed by Carl Rogers, who was a psychotherapist in the 1950s. He believed that for a person to grow, they need an environment that provides them with growth. They need that environment for it. So in law enforcement, we adopted active listening skills in about the 1980s. So as with everything else in the government, we were 30 years behind. But for crisis intervention, we took on the skills in the 80s, and the business world discovered them in the 2000s when the Black Swan Group bought the skills over into the business world. And that's when Chris Voss wrote his book, Never Split the Difference, in 2016. What is the purpose of our negotiation 9? Well, this is what I missed as a police officer. As we go through these skills, they're going to help you achieve tactical empathy. They're going to help you with your resolutions, with your agreements for any tough conversation you might have in your personal life or your business life, in your school life, in friendships. These work everywhere. People don't care how much you know until they tell you know how much they care. Have any other cops say that. But the fact is, this sounds kind of touchy-feely, but you're going to see why it worked in police work as well as the business world, because when you build tactical empathy, when you demonstrate tactical empathy, everything goes faster and smoother in your conversations. And we do a lot of coaching and a lot of teaching in the business world. And we've had plenty of clients come up to us and say, "You saved my marriage." We had one client who hadn't talked to his brother in about 20 years for an interfamilial thing. And he repaired that relationship using these skills. So these skills are vital to you in every context. So what's tactical empathy? Well, it's the calibrated application of emotional intelligence. And what's important here is that the Black Swan method, it's all about understanding the feelings and mindset of your counterpart, the person you're talking to in the moment. And as a negotiation company, we don't talk about the other side being the adversary. They're not the adversary, they're our counterpart. The adversary is the problem. That's what we're trying to both get past. We're trying to both collaborate and get through. Now, your counterpart may not be Black Swan trained, and that's fine, because you are going to make your counterpart feel so good and so understood that they'll be collaborating with you because they will reciprocate this tactical empathy. So in law enforcement, our intuition, when our hair stands up on the back of our neck, when something tells us that something's wrong, we learn to listen to that. We don't always do that in our regular lives, and most people don't do that. Now, there are some that are better than others, but most of the time we don't listen to our intuition. Know this: your conscious mind will process about 40 bits of information per second. That's what we know we're processing. Your unconscious mind, that which is all working in the background, can do up to 20 million bits per second. And if you think about that, if you internalize that, there's a lot of things that you know that you don't even know. There's been those times in your life when you have made a decision based on nothing you think about. It's in your mind, it's in your intuition. Tactical empathy is listening to your counterpart, hearing what they have to say, thinking deeply about it. What are they actually saying? What's the emotion or the internal logic behind what they're saying? Using our intuition to vocalize to them what we understand them to be saying. And the importance here is, if you can get through a difficult conversation and you never have to stop and say, oh, I understand, or I get it. If you never have to say that because your counterpart feels understood, you have just taken out all kinds of obstacles in your communication. And this will all start to make sense as we move forward. Just know that what we miss with empathy often is we don't vocalize it. We will be talking to somebody, we will think we know what they're saying, and we will act on that which we think we know, instead of vocalizing it back to them and saying, this is what I understand you to be saying. You'll say it differently, but you want to vocalize it back to them so that your counterpart feels like they're being heard. You're going to say things to them. You're going to say things about what they're feeling that they haven't told you yet. And we just had a client not very long ago that used our skills, the same skills I'm going to teach you today, on a very difficult person. And he wound up getting a message back from the person who had up to that point had refused to talk to him. And it said, you're just like a mind reader. And if you practice these skills and do these skills right, people will think people think you're reading their minds. Did you have something to add, Jorge?
Yeah, the camera just zoomed in, but I'm going to try to do this here quickly. By a show of hands, how many of you love to be listened to? How many of you loved when someone is actually paying attention to you? Yeah. Now imagine for a second that, thank you. Imagine for a second that the person now that is paying attention to you attentively, they're really paying attention to you, they're looking at you, they're engaged with you, are able to now express what you told them in a very good, in a great tone, and in a very straight manner that makes you feel understood. Raise your hands if you think that will make you feel good. Yeah, if someone is able to properly hear you and able to tell you exactly what you've been telling them while you've been speaking to them, whether it's 30 minutes, whether it's an hour, whatever time frame it might be, it makes a difference in your conversations. And this is where tactical empathy comes in. This is where, as Don is saying, you're going to be able to describe to this person from their point of view what they're saying, what they're feeling, what they're expressing. It's looking through their lens, not necessarily through yours, through theirs. You don't even have to necessarily like the person. You don't have to agree with what they're saying. You will be expressing ultimately what they've told you. Thank you.
So we get a lot of confusion, and I get confused even still. You have to be very careful that we don't confuse empathy and sympathy. I will tell you that empathy is a pretty new word. It came over to America in about the early 1900s. People misunderstand empathy, and one of the reasons that our company calls it tactical empathy is to harden it up a little bit so that people realize that it's not softness. Sympathy is very positional. It is putting yourself in another person's shoes. Sympathy is getting in the quicksand with the person who's in the quicksand. Okay. Neither of you are going anywhere, conversationally or otherwise. So when you use sympathy, when you start off with even an expression of sympathy in a difficult conversation, and don't get me wrong, sympathy has a place, but not in negotiations, not in most difficult conversations. Sympathy has a place, but it isn't to move you along towards your desired outcome. It isn't to help you collaborate. Sympathy is very positional, so it doesn't move. If if you say something like, you know, I'm having a really bad day, and I say back, oh, me too. Well, here we are. Okay. Empathy is understanding someone's thoughts and feelings so well that you can vocalize it to them before they say it. Now, as a hostage negotiator, I didn't like a lot of the people that I had to negotiate with. I had barricaded people who were truly evil people, and I didn't like them. And I didn't agree with what they were doing. I, none of it. But I could still practice empathy. I can't practice sympathy for somebody like that for all the reasons I said. Plus, I don't feel bad for them. But empathy lets me move. Empathy lets me move forward in the conversation. And by that, I mean this. If I am talking to somebody that I disagree with, if I'm talking to somebody who's verbally attacked me, who every time I do something right in a class or in a training or in a real world situation, they have some little thing to say. If I'm attacked that way, it's very easy to get triggered. With empathy, what you're doing is you're exercising genuine curiosity, and you ask yourself, what's the reason that they say that? What is the emotion and the internal logic that makes them say that? Keep in mind, you cannot, most of the time, learn this information by deciding how you would do it. So if the golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you, our platinum rule is do unto others as they wish to be done upon. Treat them the way they want to be treated, not the way you think you'd want to be treated. You'll go a long way in getting empathy. And the reason that empathy is so important, when you do it right, your counterpart's going to believe that you're very interested in their feelings and concerns. They're going to feel like they want to work with you. They're going to feel like you understand them. And when you get to that point, they're 6 times more likely to want to work with you if they have a positive outlook on you. And you're going to do that by making about 75 to 80% of the conversation about them. And this is where we start differing greatly from the transactional conversations we've had since we were little kids. Does anybody have any questions about sympathy versus empathy? Because this is very important. There's only one slide, but you have to be very careful that you don't become such a good listener that you slip into a sympathy mode, because you will just not do either one of you a whole lot of good. So just be wary of that. So we're going to launch into our negotiation 9, what we came here for. If you've read the book, Never Split the Difference, and you're in high school, you should probably get a social life. No, just kidding. But there's a master class, there's a book, there's YouTube channel that we have. We have a weekly newsletter. So all the stuff we're going to talk about, there's free stuff that you can use every day in your practice to get better and to get new ideas about how to use this. So this training is going to help you with a basic understanding of these skills and we're going to unfortunately have to leave it to you to use them. As you start using them and you get that first little success and then another little success, your little light bulb will come on and you'll make these a day-to-day thing, because while they are not technically magic, oftentimes they work like magic, and you'll really start enjoying them. So what's a label? It is simply a verbal observation of your counterpart's emotions, dynamics, their circumstances, what they're thinking and feeling in the moment, what drives them, their motivations, any of those things, and your interpretation of what they're giving you. And this is where tactical empathy comes. So what we're trying to accomplish with a label is not just identifying their motivations, but also determining whether that, or their dynamics or their circumstances, but also determining what's negative and what's positive. So if we identify negatives with these labels, we can diffuse them. If we identify positives, we can reinforce them. The big thing with labels is they gather information. And when I first started these skills as a hostage negotiator, before I got good with them and in the Black Swan Group, I loved labels. Labels were my go-to thing, and I used them very well. But on the police department, they were called emotional labels. And that put us in a little box where we didn't verbally label or give verbal feedback to anything but emotions. And we'll talk about that works, but doesn't work as well as deeper labels. Emotions, though, are usually the easiest ones to pick up, since they're the first thing we notice about other people. A surface label, it's going to be more of an emotion, like if somebody walks out of a classroom and they got the furrowed brow and they're shaking their head or they're red in the face, you might say, you might start off with the label of, you seem angry. And as long as your tone's okay and they don't feel like you're judging them, they'll give you information about that. But that's a surface label, and you may not get the real reason for their anger. If you go deeper and you say something like, seems like that wasn't quite what you expected to happen, or something like that, then they're going to get down into their internal logic, into their emotion, how they feel about it. And this is where you get the gold. Remember, as we talk about 3 personality types, and I won't go into that in here, but remember that about a third of the population react negatively to direct questions. So if you say to that same person, "Why are you angry?" they're gonna feel, a lot of people are gonna feel like they have to defend themselves about why. If instead you label it, simply change the structure, and we'll talk about the structure, and say, it seems like you're angry. You're not asking them a question, but you're about to get information. And your counterpart doesn't feel interrogated. They don't feel like you're putting them on the spot. You are saying, this is what it seems like to me, without saying those exact words, and they get a chance to explain. It's gonna give them a very good feeling about you. So structure. When we do labels, our basic labels are the 4 on top: seems like, sounds like, looks like, feels like. And you can structure almost any label with these 4. Seems like you had a bad day. Seems like you're doing an awful lot of writing. It seems like there's something that I've overlooked that is important to you. Any of those things. Switch these up so that every label that you do doesn't start the same way. And think about it as you get better at these, about adding in the feels like. I'm really starting to hit my stride on the feels like labels. And it's when you're looking at somebody and their emotions, you can say, it feels like they aren't taking this as seriously as you are. And people like to hear that. So when you do your structure, it seems like, it sounds like, it feels like, it looks like, that's pretty neutral, right? You can, if somebody says, no, that's not it at all, you can say, I didn't say that that's what you were feeling. I said, it seems like. If your tone is good and you practice your tone, remember that you can do all of these with you seem like, you sound like, you look like, you feel like, or it feels like you. um if you use you will dial into your counterpart far deeper than you will with the it label. But you is a little tricky, because if you haven't built up tactical empathy yet, or if your tone isn't just right, if you start your label with you, it can sound accusatory or judgmental. And the one obstacle that I had to overcome with labels was not making them a judgment. They're not a judgment. They're not a attack. And you have to be very careful with your tone. With labels, as with most other skills, we want to avoid the words but, and, or, and because. And this, I just said and. This is very important. If you think about it, if somebody says, it seems like you don't trust me, but you can trust me. When they say the word but, it erases everything in front of it. That's the problem with using these connecting words. And if you use and, or, because, your label becomes an explanation, which is almost worse than an attack. Because now you're, instead of trying to get information from your counterpart, you're explaining it. It seems like you don't trust me. And I got to tell you, that really bothers me because blah, 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 blah. That's not what our labels are for. Our labels, again, are our verbal observation of our counterparts' dynamics, motivators, emotions, circumstance, any of those things. They're a verbal observation, not an explanation, and not a defense. So it is a very good way of discovering your counterpart's thoughts and motivations. If you're explaining, if you're stepping on your label, it's going to lose its effectiveness. And you'll see this as you start practicing. So shorter labels are always better. They're just easier for people to process. And like I said before I told you not to use and, like I said before, when you're doing your labels, your information gathering and 70 to 80% at least of the conversation should be about them. So a nice short label, we're not telling you what to say, we're telling you how to listen. And that's what labels are for.
Just add here quickly. So think about the conversations that you're going to be having right after this event. Think about your family members, think about your parents. We always recommend that you start with low stakes. You practice with your friends, you practice at home, you practice with the family members. My daughter, she's in Columbia University, New York City, and she's actually using these skills, in particular the labels that Don is describing here, to actually gather information from her professors as they are teaching the information. So as an example, if you're in a classroom and a teacher and the future professor says, we need you to do XYZ, or here is how XYZ works, whether it's math, whatever subject you're dealing with, you can actually label that teacher. It looks like we have to do X before Y. And then you just keep quiet and watch what happens. The teacher is going to open up and give you a lot more information about that particular label that you just threw out. So it's very important, as Don said, once you use the label, you want to go silent. You want to now allow that person to express themselves and give you information. As you build your career up, labels are going to be one of the key skills that are going to help you to gather information in your jobs, in your special events that you may have, in networking events that you're going to be in. These particular skills will help you to build the knowledge that you need so you can ultimately make better decisions and build a better relationship with the person that you're dealing with.
Right. And ultimately, if you're staying genuinely curious and you approach every situation as though you have something to learn, these skills will be a lot more natural to you. They'll get a lot more natural to you, and they'll satisfy your curiosity. They will, you will learn a great deal, and you will find that that these work, like I said, almost like magic. So I know we're kind of dragging along. If anybody's got a question, scream, jump up and down. I don't mind at all. But for our labels, what happens, and we get this a lot of times, people are scared to use labels because they're scared to get it wrong. They're like, I that person looks angry or that person looks frustrated. And it's always been for most of us our habit that when something looks negative, we don't want to approach it. Just easier to talk around it. Okay. We're telling you no. We want to label those negatives. But what happens if you get it wrong? What happens if you say it seems like you don't want to go forward with this? And they say, that's not what I'm saying at all. First thing is, I know it feels like an attack, but you have to stay curious. Why did they say that? What makes them say that? So if you get it wrong, your counterpart will usually, because of the law of negotiation gravity, that being the urge for them to correct you is irresistible. People love to tell you got it wrong. They love to tell you that you ain't got it figured out. And armed with this knowledge, when you go out from here, try these out a little bit, because you can do a mislabel by on purpose. And it's kind of like a little bit of a lie detector, not a lie detector, but a truth dispenser. Because when people correct you, they often correct you with very candid information. So they will say things that they did not mean to tell you or that they should not be telling you. We've had clients come back to us and tell us when they mislabeled somebody, either on accident or on purpose, that they learned information that it was not, the other side wasn't legally capable of providing, but they did, because they were so happy that they got to tell them they're wrong. And so be aware of that. If you're going to mislabel somebody on purpose, it's not bad. Just beware that you don't do it so often that they feel like they're not being listened to. Because like no-oriented questions, mislabels they're nothing to be scared of. But if you overuse them, the other side's going to feel manipulated, and that's not what we want. We want our skills to be used for good. Remember that the difference between manipulation and influence is intent, your intent. If you intend to manipulate somebody, you sure can. But know that they will know that you've done it. They will feel it, and they won't do business with you again. They won't want to work with you again. They won't want to talk to you again if they feel manipulated. So what we want is to build tactical empathy and get to trust-based influence. And that's all about your intent and how you're moving this stuff forward. So we have a go-to list, because in every space, there are labels that work. They're appropriate in nearly every conversation. If you see a change in your counterpart, if you're face to face and not on the phone, and you see a change in your counterpart's affect, label that. Listen with your eyes and label it. It feels like this is important to you. It looks like something crossed your mind. It seems like I might be missing something. Any of those things. But these go-to labels, feels like this is important to you. Think about what that does if somebody had said that to you during your last, something you felt strongly about, or some work or school project. Nobody asks about what's important to you, do they? They'll ask what you're struggling with. They might ask they might ask a number of questions, but nobody looks at you after you've given a little demonstration or a little talk or something like that, or even just pointed something out and said, it feels like this is important to you. When people do that for you, you'll feel better. When you do it for your counterpart, they're going to talk, because nobody, in this day and age, we get so focused on ourselves, on on problem solving that we don't truly listen to our counterparts. And when you throw out a label like that, when that's what your intuition is telling you that this person is saying without saying it, it makes them feel better. And you're going to get a more positive response. You're going to get a lot of information. So it looks like you've given this a lot of thought. It sounds like there's nothing I can do to change your mind. This one is a good one for right at the end when you're about to walk out the door. When you guys have been talking for hours or even days and you're just not getting to where you want to be, then you say something like, it sounds like there's nothing I can do to change your mind. Now, people are worried about this because they're like, well, what if they say yes? What if they say there's nothing you can do to change my mind? Well, now you got your answer. And let me tell you, it's always better to know than wonder. Moving from wondering to knowing is what you want to do with these skills. So if that happens and they say, nope, there's nothing I can do to change your mind, and you know that you can't do it any other way, then you simply leave a good last impression. You say, boy, that stinks because I really, really wanted to do this with you, to collaborate with you on this. I hope that someday, if the stars align, that we can work together. Leave them with a good last impression. That's what they're going to remember. They're going to remember two parts of your conversation. If you have a 3-hour conversation, your counterpart is most likely to remember the most intense part and the end. That's the two things they'll remember. So leave a good last impression. This last label on here, this is our go-to label that we use all the time on the Black Swan Group. I use it all the time at work because I still volunteer for the hostage negotiator team. And at home, it seems like you have a reason for, and then you end it with saying that, thinking that, feeling that, or my favorite, and it's not up there, is asking that. Seems like you have a reason for asking that. Let me tell you, I know we're probably running a little bit behind on time, but I'm going to tell you a story anyway because it's very worthwhile. When somebody asks you, "Hey, what are you doing tonight after class?" Or, "Hey, what are your plans for the weekend?" Okay, where does your mind go? Everybody's like, "Oh, here we go." That's like asking somebody, "Hey, do you still own a pickup?" You know they're going to ask you to move. To help them move. So when somebody asks you a question like that, and you're not sure of their motivation, and you're a little worried about what you're opening yourself up for, if you say, "Yeah, I'm available after class," or "Yeah, I'm available this weekend," this label, it seems like you have a reason for asking that. If you say it with genuine curiosity and a good tone of voice, your counterpart's going to explain what they're looking for. They're going to explain their motivation. And how nice is it if they say, "Oh yeah, well, my car's in the shop down the road and I know you live that way and I was hoping you could give me a ride instead of me calling somebody else." Just, you wouldn't even have to go out of your way. Now you know. They've explained to you what you're getting into and you've tested their motivation. And these things, they feel clunky when you first start them. They feel awkward. Know that when something feels awkward, it is accelerating your learning. I dedicated myself to getting good at these skills, and I hope you guys do too, because when you do, you can use labels like these right here in a very casual conversation, and you're going to make your counterpart feel better, and you're going to be so natural at it if you practice it every day that it'll just become part of your conversation. When people ask bad questions or they phrase their questions poorly, use this last label. It seems like you have a reason for asking that. And let them explain. You're not judging them, you're not attacking them. You're letting them have the mic and letting them tell you what they're thinking, and it's going to make them feel good. So use those labels whenever you have a chance. Before we move on from labels, just know, like I said, that labels are one of the fastest ways to get to the unknown unknowns in your conversations. Practice them with friends and with all of our negotiation 9 skills. As you start using them, the people that you're going to have the hardest time using them with are people that you know well or family members. And there's two reasons for that. One, they're going to know that you are talking differently and they're going to call you on it. They're going to ask you what you're doing. Tell them, I'm trying to get better. I learned some active listening skills, some proactive listening skills, in fact, from a guy who looked like a cartoon cowboy, and I'm trying to get better. So I'm trying to listen to you better, because that's what you're trying to do with these skills. The other reason that we fail many times with our family and close friends and coworkers is because we think we already know what makes them tick. So we fail to exercise our genuine curiosity. And that becomes a problem. Do you have anything to add before we move on to mirrors?
No, we're good to go.
We're good. So mirrors are our next one. And these are so simple. We spend a lot of time on labels because labels are kind of complicated. Know that when you're doing any of these techniques, kind of clear your mind, because none of these work without genuine curiosity, a good tone of voice, and your ability to really listen to what your counterpart is saying. We all think of ourselves as good listeners, right? But actually, most of us aren't. I always thought I was a great listener as a cop. I could sell people I arrested magazine subscriptions by the time I got them to jail. It was never personal. We always got along very well. Then I started really practicing these skills and realizing how horrible of a listener I actually was, because we're conditioned from our very earliest stages to listen to what our counterpart's saying, whether it's our parents when we're little or our friends when we're in school. And we listen to what people are saying to get the gist of what they're saying so that we can respond. Or if it's in another kind of difficult conversation, maybe we're listening for what we want to rebut. We listen to them for as long as it takes to say, I got my argument. And we tune them out for the whole rest of their thing, because we're thinking about what we're going to say. For these skills to work, you have to listen. Listen for their emotion, listen for their internal logic. And again, it's not about liking them or agreeing with them, but you can't reach tactical empathy if you don't listen to what they are saying and what they're not saying, so that you can get a good read on them. And mirrors are very simple and very easy to use. Now, they are an attending skill. They were a listening skill. I was never that great at mirrors, which is kind of, for me, I don't know why, because they're so simple. All a mirror is repeating verbatim the last 3 to 5 words of what somebody tells you. Make sure it's important words, not anything too mundane. But you'll find that if you're truly listening, instead of thinking about what you're going to say, with a label, I found it's easy for me to, when somebody's talking and they're talking for a while, I can say in my mind, it seems like, and I pick up what they are what they're not saying as well as what they're saying. I learned this from another one of our instructors. And then when they're done talking, when there's a break and they've turned it over to me, then I just simply start by saying, it seems like, and my label forms itself. With mirrors, you listen intently to what they're saying, and then you repeat the last 3 to 5 words. So the beauty of these is in the inflection, in your voice tone. So if you use a mirror and you say last 3 words with an upward inflection, that's not a question buzzword, but your counterpart hears it as that, as wanting more information. Last 3 words, upward inflection equals curiosity. If you do a downward inflection, last 3 words. Now you're giving them, you're saying, I get it, go on, tell me more. And you're not interrupting the conversation. I was concerned at first with mirrors that they would feel like they were a conversation stopper. They're actually very natural as you practice them. And your counterpart has a very hard time resisting a mirror. You can use mirrors further back in the conversation if you want to. If somebody's said a bunch of stuff and you want to mirror something in the middle, just mirror 2 or 3 words there to get them to tell you more about that. Because remember, it takes the place of I get it or tell me more. You can use it further back in the conversation, I would warn you that until you practice the last 3 to 5 words, don't don't get too into trying to perfect it way back in the conversation, because it just gets harder. But the only real hazard to mirrors, if you overuse them, people will feel like you're a parrot, and they're going to stop. They're going to feel like you're not listening. The other one is if you do mirrors or stuff that isn't necessarily that important. If if they say, he isn't listening to me anymore, and you say anymore, that can get you some information, but the last 3 words, he isn't listening to me anymore, isn't listening, that's that may be where you want to explore. So when you use a mirror, remember that their words coming out of your mouth feels good to their ears. And remember that, like I said, it's almost irresistible for them to give you information with that upward inflection on a mirror. I'm forgetting something about mirrors. Jorge, help me out.
I was going to add here, it's incredibly important that you understand you're going to feel awkward while you're going to use these. You might even think that the person that you're using a mirror on is going to say, stop saying what I said. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to move you away from the why. How many of you, by a show of hands, here I go asking another show of hands, how many of you, by a show of hands, loved when your parents used to ask, or sometimes ask, why did you do that? I don't think I'm seeing any hands. That's because we don't like that. So we use labels and we use mirrors instead of asking questions. And when we do this, we engage the other person in a more neutral, respectful, and in such a way that the person feels understood and at the same time wants to give us information. So the next time you're going to speak to a parent or they're asking you a question which you don't understand or you want a little bit more clarity on, mirror them. Your parent might say, I want you to please take this trash can and put it in X place. I'm just throwing out something. You say, X place? Just repeat the last 2 to 3 words and then go quiet and watch what's going to happen. You can go on, brother.
It's funny because I got mirrored the other day in a live event, and what I said was my biggest regret was that I didn't have Black Swan training before I was a cop. Also, that I wasn't undercover for 2 years before I was in high school. But the one of the students kind of sarcastically mirrored me. He goes, biggest regret? And I said, yeah. And I started to explain it. And the rest of the class started laughing because they knew that I had been hit with a mirror. My mind processed it as his genuine curiosity because he did a very good tone. And it's almost irresistible. The other caution I have with all of these skills, but with mirrors in particular, with mirrors, be careful of their length. 3 to 5 words. If you get too much above that, again, your counterpart's going to think that you're just parroting them, or you're going to go into a weird, make them feel awkward about you repeating their entire sentence. So keep it short, 3 to 5 words, but the same words that your counterpart said. And while we're talking about this, know that what you're in is a conversation. So not every sentence you say is going to be a Black Swan skill. That'll make you sound robotic. But find places to use these skills in low stakes practice, like Jorge said, with a parent or with anybody, and you will see what you get out of it. My favorite thing to do is go into a store, look at the cashier. You know, the cashier's had the same conversation with 200 people before you. Did you find everything you want? How are you doing today? That kind of thing. I go up there, I give them a cold read real quick. I intuitively determine, if I can, from their affect, their mood, or if they're super busy, I'll just say, wow, it seems like you might not even get a break today. And then I just go quiet. And this person, sometimes they just answer you with a short, yeah, but they feel heard in that moment. And a lot of people will tell you their whole life story. I got trapped in a Chick-fil-A drive-through the other day because I labeled a kid and then mirrored him about his high school wrestling. And he talked to me for about 9 minutes because we had people honking behind us about his Brazilian jiu-jitsu and his training and his all this other stuff. These make people feel good and they give you good information. In difficult conversations, you'll see that it's vitally important. So we're going to move on to dynamic silence. Dynamic silence is intentionally creating a void in the conversation. And it is by far one of the easiest skills, right? Because it's just being quiet. It's also one of the hardest skills to master. We're not good at it as human beings. If I ask you a question, and this goes back to the cop days, but it went back to my school days too. If I ask you a question and you don't answer me right away, I'm gonna fire another question at you or ask you, did you hear me? Or something like that. If I ask a question, I want an answer. And we're transactional, right, in our conversations. So at the cash register, the cashier says, did you find everything you need? Oh yeah, I found more than I needed. And then they say something, and then you say something, and then they give you your change, and then you say goodbye, and they say goodbye, and they say thank you for shopping at Albertsons, and you say you too, and then you walk away, right? Very transactional. And we're not always plugged in, we don't always listen, which is why we say stuff like that. um with these skills, with dynamic silence, you're creating an intentional void in the conversation and people feel awkward in silence. This is one of the skills that I was very good at in law enforcement, and it helped a great deal. When you do just dynamic silence after a label, after a mirror, after any of our skills, really, you will find that people want to fill that void. They want to fill that silence, and they'll tell you things without you asking them another question. It's also very good for getting people to start negotiating with themselves. I had one just the other day where I was buying a piece of pool equipment, and this guy was telling me, he's selling me on all this other stuff, and I was looking at it, and I could tell he really wanted this sale, and I didn't know how bad I was getting with this because it's pretty new and there were some issues with it. So instead of a label, instead of a mirror, instead of any other thing, I just went quiet and I looked at what we were looking at and I just sat there contemplating it. And I didn't count. If I had it, probably would have been about 3 seconds. He had negotiated with himself and he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. Because he thought he was about to get a no. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll throw in this, I'll throw in that, I'll throw in this. I had a great deal that I hadn't asked for. And people read dynamic silence differently. Some people, it makes them real uncomfortable. Some people appreciate you going silent because they get to talk and they'll fill that whole void. So if somebody says something that it's unwarranted, that's untoward, that makes you feel uncomfortable, instead of attacking back, consider dynamic silence. Just silence with, looking at your counterpart. Again, they're going to start thinking about what they just said. If it was irresponsible of them to say, they're going to hopefully take ownership of that. No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that. I blah 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 blah, and they'll get off their little attack mode. But silence keeps you from stepping on our skills, and it also keeps you on track with getting information. So this one takes practice. Like I said, we've been conditioned our whole lives to initiate, to engage, to try to get something out of our counterpart. How long do you let it sit? If you ask a question and nobody says anything and you're sitting there in your dynamic silence, well, we used to say at about 12 seconds, you probably missed something and you should label that. Now as these skills evolve, we say it's conditional. If you're sitting there talking to somebody and you go into dynamic silence, you create that void, and the other person is obviously thinking, the other person is obviously not distressed, let it roll. In an interview between two famous people not very long ago on a podcast, one asked the other a question and he sat there in silence for 22 seconds. But the interviewer could tell he was thinking. He wasn't distressed, and he let him think, and it was a great answer. Same token, if you're sitting there and you're in dynamic silence and your counterpart gives you a look or starts shaking their head, or it feels like they're in a negative space, we don't want them to stay in that negative space. So we're going to come out of it with a label. Seems like I'm failing to be sensitive to something important to you. It seems like I've missed the mark. It sounds like you have questions, something like that. So again, this one's only as good as your practice. So do practice it. Do you have something, Jorge?
Yeah, we have less than 7 minutes. So
Let's roll through.
yeah, we want just here quickly. Did anyone have any questions about anything that Don just taught in the past few minutes here? Because we don't want to we don't want to close and answer any, like, if we have to leave the last few minutes just for question or answer a couple questions from you, because we're not going to be able to finish the entire presentation. However, did you have any questions, anything whatsoever that Don can answer?
I'm going to roll through here because these three skills are by far our most important. They're the fastest to your Black Swan. So if you take nothing else, practice these three skills: labels, mirrors, and dynamic silence. But we can get through these others reasonably quickly, I think. Does somebody have a question?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, are there any books on this subject, and can I find any more this Black Swan info online?
Absolutely. The book is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, Negotiating as If Your Life Depended on It. There is a really good book by Derek Gaunt, who's in our team, called Ego, Authority, Failure. And for real estate agents, but for anybody really, they just released The Full Fee Agent, which is another book. But online, we have a YouTube channel. We have a LinkedIn group, and you can follow us on LinkedIn. They post a bunch of stuff on there. Any of the social media stuff we have, and then I would go onto the website, blackswan.com or blackswanltd.com, and sign up for our weekly newsletter, because it'll give you, we talk a lot about, especially the labels, mirrors, and dynamic silence. So just be aware of that, and practice your skills, like I said, every day. So we're going to shoot through here real quick. Paraphrases is basically saying what your counterpart said, but using your own words, so not a mirror. You are going to use your words to give back to them what they're saying. And this is another attending skill. This just demonstrates that you're listening and allows them to go on. It'll allow them to correct you if they need to, but it's you take a little bit of their conversation, you package it in your own words and just give it back to them to just check in and make sure that you are where you need to be. And it encourages them to keep sharing. Our summary is probably our skill that we don't use as often as we should. And it's basically a heavy paraphrase and a label. And what we're gonna do on a summary, and you can do this at the beginning of a conversation. If you're going in for a job interview and you've had some email contacts and things like that, you can walk in and say, when it's your turn to talk, and say, so far, what we've talked about is this and this and this and this. And as a result, you feel that we could have a long-term working relationship. But you're going to summarize all they said. It's good at the beginning. It's good just before you make an ask. If you're asking for more salary or an extension on a project or anything like that, summarize everything you've talked about. It lets your counterpart know that you're dialed in, that you've got it. It makes them feel good. And our purpose behind a summary, and we'll talk about that in a second, but summaries you can use throughout the conversation. And you can say, you know, so far you've told me, as a result you feel, and then dynamic silence, because what we're looking for is a that's right. If you summarize so well all the stuff you've covered, and I'm not just talking about what they've said, but what they feel, their dynamics, their circumstances, all the things we have in our emotions, we're looking for that's right, an emotional buy-in. If they say you're right, be careful, because you're right is sometimes dismissive. Sometimes that means they just want you to stop talking. I'm sure all of you are about ready to scream you're right, but what you're looking for is that's right, that emotional bond, or exactly, or hell yeah, any of those things where it's an emotional response to your summary, other than just you're right. Because if you get a just you're right, you might want to label that and explore it a little bit. Seems like there's something that I may not be being sensitive to, and just see what they give you. Again, just stay curious.
Don, so
Yeah.
we have to wrap up.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm going to go then to the very last one, to tone. Know that what you say, or how you say it, is 13 times more important than what you say. It is the first thing that people notice about you, so it's extremely important. It can make or break your attempt to reach your counterpart, so be aware of that. Always, always, always stay away from an assertive tone. When we argue, we defend ourselves, we come back sharply. All you're going to do is start sparring. If somebody attacks you, either use a low and slow assertive tone, or I'm sorry, an analyst tone, where you just slow your cadence, lower your voice a little bit, and label or mirror out of that attack. If you raise your voice, you are going to say things that you regret, and you're not going forward in your conversation. Just remember, it's not about you. Deference is the key. If you feel awkward, you're learning. And for sure, always stay curious. Practice these every day, or you will lose them. If you practice them every day, you'll make money. You'll go further in your relationships. These things work to get hostage takers out of very sticky situations when their option is jail. They can definitely take your counterparts to a place they want to be, not jail.
Hey, thank you, Jorge and Don. Thank you so much. That was awesome.